The frozen encounter, the December wind howled through downtown Seattle like an angry ghost, carrying with it the promise of the season's first real snowfall. Street lamps flickered against the growing darkness as the city began to empty of its usual rush-hour crowds. At the corner of Pine and 3rd Avenue, beneath the shelter of a weather-beaten bus stop, Daniel Rodriguez stood with his hands buried deep in the pockets of his faded military jacket. At 52, Daniel carried the weight of too many winters. On his shoulders, his weathered face told stories of battles fought in distant lands and harder ones waged on home soil. 3 years ago, he had been Sergeant Daniel Rodriguez, a decorated veteran with 20 years of service to his country. Now he was just another invisible face in the crowd, another casualty of a system that had forgotten its heroes. The small backpack at his feet contained everything he owned: a change of clothes, a worn photograph of his late wife Maria, and the Purple Heart he'd earned in Afghanistan. The metal felt heavier these days, not with pride, but with the bitter irony of what his sacrifice had cost him. The nightmares, the sleepless nights, the inability to hold down a job they had all conspired to strip away the life he'd once known. Daniel checked the cracked face of his father's old watch. The number 47 bus was running late, probably delayed by the weather. He didn't have anywhere urgent to be, but the warm shelter downtown would close its doors in 2 hours, and he needed to secure a spot for the night. The temperature was dropping fast, and his thin jacket, while precious to him for its memories, offered little protection against Seattle's harsh December bite as he shifted from foot to foot. Trying to generate some warmth, Daniel noticed he wasn't alone at the stop. A woman emerged from the swirling snow, moving with the quick, purposeful stride of someone accustomed to efficiency. She wore a tailored black business suit that probably cost more than Daniel had seen in months, but no coat. Her dark hair whipped around her face as she clutched a leather briefcase against her chest like armor. Victoria Chen was 38 and had spent the last 15 years climbing the corporate ladder with relentless determination. As the chief technology officer of Neuralink Dynamics, one of Seattle's fastest-growing tech companies, she was used to being in control. But tonight, control had abandoned her completely. Her assistant had booked her a rideshare to the airport for a crucial meeting in San Francisco, but the driver had canceled last minute due to the weather. Her backup plan, the company car, had broken down just blocks from her office. Now she stood at a public bus stop for the first time in over a decade, watching her carefully orchestrated schedule crumble like the snowflakes melting on the pavement. Victoria's phone buzzed incessantly with messages from her team, investors, and the board members waiting for her presentation tomorrow morning. She tried to ignore the cold seeping through her thin suit jacket, but her body betrayed her with violent shivers that she couldn't control. In her rush to leave the office, she'd forgotten her coat, a mistake that seemed increasingly foolish. With each passing moment, Daniel watched the woman from the corner of his eye. He'd learned to read people during his years on the street, and everything about her screamed success and privilege. The designer shoes, the expensive briefcase, the way she held herself with the confidence of someone who'd never had to wonder where their next meal would come from. Under normal circumstances, their paths would never cross. She lived in a world of boardrooms and first-class flights. He inhabited the shadows that most people pretended didn't exist. But as the wind picked up and the snow began to fall harder, Daniel saw something that transcended social boundaries: human suffering. The woman was shivering uncontrollably now, her lips taking on a bluish tint that he recognized from his military days. She was dressed for a climate-controlled office, not a Seattle winter storm. Victoria wrapped her arms tighter around herself, but the cold seemed to penetrate deeper with each gust of wind. She considered calling another rideshare, but the app showed no available drivers in the area. The irony wasn't lost on her. She who had built systems to solve problems, who had algorithms at her fingertips capable of predicting market trends, and consumer behavior, couldn't solve the simple problem of getting warm. Her phone rang. She answered with numb fingers. "Victoria, where are you?" The voice belonged to James Park, her business partner, and the company's CEO. "The investors are asking questions. You were supposed to be wheels up an hour ago." "I'm stuck," she said through chattering teeth. "Transport issues. I might have to push the meeting." "You know we can't do that. This funding round is make or break. Without this investment, we're looking at layoffs before the new year." Victoria closed her eyes, feeling the weight of her entire team's futures pressing down on her shoulders. 237 employees, most of them young engineers with families, student loans, and dreams of changing the world through technology. If she failed to secure this funding, if her presentation didn't convince the investors tomorrow, all of those dreams would crumble. "I'll figure it out," she said, ending the call before James could add more pressure to an already impossible situation. Daniel had heard enough of the conversation to understand that the woman was in real trouble, not just from the cold. From whatever crisis was unfolding in her professional life, he looked down at his own jacket, the one piece of his former life that still brought him comfort. It had been with him through desert storms and mountain freezes, through the ceremony where he'd married Maria and the funeral where he'd buried her. It was worn thin in places, and the zipper stuck sometimes, but it was warm, and it was his. For a moment he hesitated. Years of rejection, of being looked through rather than looked at, had taught him to keep to himself. People like this woman didn't want help from people like him. He wanted to pretend that homelessness was something that happened to other people. People who had made different choices. People who somehow deserved their fate. But then Victoria stumbled slightly, her heels slipping on the wet pavement, and Daniel saw not a successful executive, but a human being in distress. Without allowing himself to overthink it, stood up and began to unzip his jacket. The cold hit him immediately, cutting through his thin t-shirt like a blade. But Daniel had endured worse discomfort in service of others, and this felt right. In a way that nothing had felt right for months. "Miss," he said softly, not wanting to startle her. Victoria turned, and for the first time, their eyes met directly. She saw a man with kind eyes set in a weathered face, silver threading through his dark hair, and the unmistakable bearing of someone who had once carried great responsibility. "You look cold," Daniel said, extending his jacket toward her. "Please, take this." Victoria stared at the offering, her mind struggling to process what was happening. This man, clearly homeless based on his appearance and the small backpack at his feet, was offering her his only protection against the cold. "I can't take your jacket," she said automatically. "You need it more than I do." Daniel shook his head, a gentle smile crossing his face. "I've been cold before, miss. I'll survive, but you... ... He gestured at her business attire. "You're not dressed for this weather, please." Something in his voice, a quiet authority that spoke of years spent caring for others, made Victoria's protests die in her throat. This wasn't pity or charity. It was simply one human being helping another in need. With hands that shook from more than just cold, she accepted the jacket. It was larger than she needed, worn soft from years of use, and it smelled faintly of old wool and something indefinable that spoke of dignity maintained despite difficult circumstances. As she pulled it around her shoulders, Victoria felt an immediate relief from the biting wind. But more than that, she felt something she hadn't experienced in years, the profound impact of unexpected kindness from a stranger. "Thank you," she whispered, and the words carried more weight than any she'd spoken in a boardroom. Daniel nodded and sat back down, crossing his arms over his chest to conserve what warmth he could. "What's your name?" he asked. Victoria Chen?" She sat beside him on the narrow bench, the expensive briefcase resting between them like a bridge between two worlds. "And you?" "Daniel Rodriguez. Pleasure to meet you, Miss Chen." He sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the snow fall more heavily around them. Victoria found herself studying Daniel's profile, noting the way he held himself despite his circumstances, straight-backed and alert, like someone accustomed to responsibility. "Were you in the military?" she asked, Daniel's eyebrows raised. Slightly in surprise. 20 years, Army? How did you know? The way you sit, the way you scan the area?" "My grandfather was career Navy. He had the same habits." A ghost of a smile crossed Daniel's face. Old habits die hard. The bus finally appeared through the snow, its headlights cutting through the darkness like beacons of hope. As it pulled up to the stop, Victoria made a decision that would change both their lives forever. "Daniel," she said, standing and adjusting. his jacket around her shoulders. "I have a proposition for you. I'm supposed to be on a plane to San Francisco right now for the most important meeting of my career. Instead, I'm standing at a bus stop in a snowstorm wearing a stranger's jacket." She paused, weighing her words carefully. "But maybe that's exactly where I'm supposed to be?" The bus doors opened with a hydraulic hiss, but neither of them moved toward it. "I don't understand," Daniel said. Victoria pulled out her phone and quickly typed a message to James. "Meeting postponed 24 hours. Trust me on this." Then she looked back at Daniel with a determination that had built companies and changed industries. "I want to buy you dinner, Daniel Rodriguez. And I want to hear your story, because something tells me that this meeting, right here, right now, is going to be more important than anything that could happen in a San Francisco boardroom." Daniel stared at her, his mind reeling. In 3 years of living on the streets, no one had asked to hear his story. No one had seen him as anything more than an inconvenience or, at best, an object of pity. The bus driver honked impatiently. But Victoria didn't even glance in that direction. She extended her hand to Daniel, and in that gesture, he saw something he'd almost forgotten existed: hope. "You don't even know me," he said quietly. "No," Victoria agreed, her hand still extended. "But I know kindness when I see it. And I know that person who gives his only jacket to a stranger in a snowstorm is exactly the kind of person the world needs more of." Daniel looked at her outstretched hand, then at the bus pulling away from the curb, its opportunity disappearing into the snowy night. Then he reached out and grasped her hand, allowing her to help him to his feet. As they walked away from the empty bus stop together, the successful executive and the homeless veteran, both wrapped in the warmth of an unexpected connection. Neither could have imagined the extraordinary journey that lay ahead. Sometimes the most important meetings aren't the ones we plan for, but the ones that find us when we're brave enough to see beyond our own circumstances and recognize the humanity in a stranger's eyes. Seeds have changed the small diner Victoria had chosen was nothing like the upscale restaurants where she usually conducted business. Tommy's all-night cafe sat wedged between a laundromat and a pawn shop, its neon sign flickering intermittently against the stormy night. But it was warm, open, and most importantly, it felt like neutral ground, a place where a tech executive and a homeless veteran could sit across from each other without the weight of their different worlds down on them. Daniel hesitated at the entrance, suddenly aware of how he must look in his worn clothes and 3-day stubble. The jacket Victoria wore, his jacket, had been his armor against the world's judgment, and without it, he felt exposed. "It's okay," Victoria said softly, noticing his hesitation. "I called ahead, Marge. The owner is expecting us." Inside, the diner buzzed with the quiet activity of night shift workers grabbing coffee and late commuters warming up before heading home. A woman in her 60s, with silver hair pinned back and kind eyes, approached them. "You must be Victoria," she said with a smile that immediately put Daniel at ease. "I'm Marge. Booth in the back is ready for you folks." As they settled into the cracked vinyl seats of the corner booth, Victoria couldn't help but notice how Daniel's posture changed. The alertness remained, but some of the defensive tension melted away. This place felt safe to him in a way that few places did anymore. "Coffee?" Marge asked, already filling 2 cups without waiting for an answer. "Please, Daniel," said gratefully, wrapping his hands around the warm, ceramic mug. It had been weeks since he'd held a cup of fresh coffee. The shelter served instant, and the churches that provided meals usually offered lukewarm beverages at best. Victoria watched him savor that first sip and realized how many simple pleasures she took for granted: her home espresso machine, the premium coffee service in her office, the ability to walk into any cafe and order whatever she wanted without thinking about the cost. All luxuries that Daniel had once known and lost. "Tell me about your family," Victoria said gently, settling back in the booth. Daniel's eyes grew distant but not sad. "Maria and I were married for 18 years before the cancer took her. We never had kids, tried for a long time, but it just wasn't meant to be. She used to say that maybe we were meant to take care of each other instead." He smiled softly. "She was a teacher, 3rd grade. Loved those kids like they were her own. She sounds wonderful." She was. Patient, kind, saw the best in everyone. Even me, especially when I came back from my tours, changed. Daniel's fingers traced the rim of his coffee cup. The nightmares, the anger, the way certain sounds would send me diving for cover. She never made me feel broken, just human. Victoria nodded, thinking of her own relationship history. A series of high-achieving partners who understood her ambition, but never quite understood her. How long has it been since she passed? 4 years next month? Some medical bills, ... Daniel trailed off, then straightened his shoulders. I'm not telling you this for pity. He asked about my family, and she was my family. Everything I was, everything good about me, was better because of her, and after she died. Daniel was quiet for a long moment, watching the steam rise from his coffee. I fell apart, started drinking too much, stopped showing up to my job at the construction company. Lost the house, lost my friends, lost my way. The VA tried to help, but the system is overwhelmed, and I was too proud to fight for what I needed. Marge returned with menus, but Victoria waved them away. Whatever's good tonight, Marge, for both of us. Meatloaf and mashed potatoes, apple pie for dessert. Can't go wrong with the classics. Marge refilled their coffee cups and disappeared. Back toward the kitchen. Now it's your turn, Daniel said, leaning forward slightly. What's a woman like you doing catching public buses to the airport? Victoria laughed, but there was little humor in it. Would you believe that despite all my success, I'm probably about to lose everything too? Daniel's eyebrows raised in surprise. He'd assumed that someone dressed like Victoria, carrying herself with such confidence, lived in a world where problems could be solved with money and connections. The company I built with my business partner were running out of funding. Tomorrow's meeting in San Francisco was supposed to secure our next round of investment. Without it, we'll have to lay off most of our team before Christmas. What kind of company is it? We develop neural interface technology, basically. Systems that allow people to control computers and devices directly with their thoughts. It sounds like science fiction, but it's real, and it could change lives, especially for people with disabilities, veterans with traumatic injuries, anyone who's lost mobility or function. Daniel set down his coffee cup with a slight clink. Veterans, among others, yes. We're working on applications for prosthetics control, treatment for PTSD, rehabilitation for traumatic brain injuries. The possibilities are incredible, but the technology is expensive to develop and even more expensive to test safely. And the investors don't see the value? Victoria sighed. They see the value, but they also see the risk. Medical devices take years to get approved, the regulatory pathway is complex, and there's no guarantee of success. They'd rather put their money into the next social media app or ride-sharing platform, something with a clearer path to profit. Marge appeared with 2 steaming plates of comfort food that filled the booth with the aroma of home cooking. Daniel stared at his plate for a moment before picking up his fork. It had been days since he'd had a hot meal that wasn't served on a paper plate in a church basement. So what happens now? He asked between bites. I don't know, James. My partner thinks I should pivot the presentation, focus more on the commercial applications and less on the medical ones. Make it about market share and profit margins instead of helping people. But that's not why you built the company. Victoria looked up sharply. How did you know that? Daniel smiled. The way your eyes light up when you talk about helping veterans and people with disabilities. That's not corporate speak. That's passion. That's purpose. They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes, both lost in their own thoughts. Outside, the snow continued to fall, transforming the city into something softer, more forgiving. Can I ask you something personal? Victoria said finally. You've answered all my questions. Fair's fair. When you came back from Afghanistan, the nightmares, the adjustment issues, did you ever consider that technology might help, not replace treatment, but supplement it? Daniel considered this carefully. I went to the VA hospital for a while, group therapy, medication management, the whole program. Some of it helped, but it felt ... impersonal, like they were treating symptoms instead of understanding the person behind them. What if there was technology that could help therapists understand what you were experiencing? Not replace the human connection, but give them better tools to help. You mean like reading thoughts? Not reading thoughts exactly, but monitoring? Brain patterns, stress responses, emotional states. Imagine if a therapist could see in real time when a memory or topic was causing distress, or track how well different treatments were working for your specific brain chemistry. Daniel set down his fork, intrigued despite himself. That sounds incredibly invasive. It could be if implemented wrong, but done right, with proper consent and privacy protections, it could revolutionize mental health treatment, especially for veterans who've seen things that are hard to put into words. Is that what you're trying to build? Victoria nodded, among other things. But the investors want to see the commercial applications first: gaming, virtual reality, productivity, enhancement. They think the medical applications are too niche, too risky. They're wrong, Daniel said quietly. I know they are, but I'm one voice against a room full of people who only see dollar signs. Then you need more voices. Victoria looked at him curiously. What do you mean? Daniel leaned back in the booth, his mind working. You said the investors don't understand the value because they don't see the need? They think helping veterans is niche because they've never been veterans. They think mental health technology is risky because they've never needed mental health treatment. Okay, double quotes, so show them. Not with charts and projections, but with stories. Real people, real needs, real impact. I don't have case studies. Yet, the technology isn't ready for human trials. You have something better. You have people who could benefit from it. People who can explain why it matters, why it's worth a risk and investment. Victoria stared at him as the idea began. To take shape in her mind? You mean like a focus group? I mean like a room full of stakeholders. Veterans, people with disabilities, family members, caregivers. Let them tell the investors what it's like to live with the problems your technology could solve. That's... Victoria paused, her mind racing through the logistics. That's actually brilliant. But I can't organize something like that in 24 hours. Daniel smiled. Maybe you can't. But I bet I know some people who could help. You do? There's a veterans center about 6 blocks from here. Tuesday nights, they host a support group that draws about 30 people. Vets from Vietnam too. Afghanistan, family members, some civilian trauma survivors. Good people who've been through hell and came out the other side. Victoria felt her pulse quicken. You'd think they'd be willing to talk to investors? Think they'd be honored to help. Especially if they knew it might lead to better treatment for others like them. But the timeline, my meeting is tomorrow afternoon. Then we make some calls tonight. Marge has a phone you can use, and I know most of these folks don't sleep much anyway. The question is, are you willing to scrap your corporate presentation and do something completely different? Victoria thought about James, about the board members, about the investors who would be expecting polished slides and market analysis. Then she thought about the 37 people in her company who would lose their jobs if this funding round failed. Yes, she said without hesitation. Yes, I am. Daniel grinned, the first genuinely happy expression she'd seen from him all evening. Then let's get to work. They spent the next 3 hours at that corner booth. Victoria's laptop connected to the diner's spotty Wi-Fi. Daniel making calls to friends and contacts he hadn't spoken to in months. By midnight, they had commitments from 12 veterans, 3 family members, and 1 doctor from the VA hospital to meet with the investors via video conference. This is insane, Victoria said, rubbing her tired eyes. I'm about to bet my company's future on a presentation. I'm creating in a diner at midnight with someone I met 4 hours ago. Sometimes the best decisions are the ones that feel crazy. Daniel said, besides, you're not betting on the presentation. You're betting on the truth. And the truth is that what you're building matters. As they prepared to leave, Victoria reached for her wallet, but Daniel shook his head. I've got it, he said, pulling out a crumpled $20 bill, probably the last money he had. Daniel, no. You've already given me your jacket and your time and your ideas. Let me buy dinner for someone who listened to my story and didn't look away, he said firmly. It's been a long time since I felt like I had something valuable to offer. But tonight, you gave me that gift. Victoria felt tears prick her eyes, but she nodded. Thank you. For everything. As they stepped back out into the snowy night, Victoria still wearing Daniel's jacket. Both of them carrying the weight of tomorrow's uncertain presentation, neither could have predicted. what was about to unfold. In 12 hours, Victoria would be standing in front of a room full of skeptical investors, not with charts and graphs, but with Daniel beside her and a screen full of faces that represented not just market opportunity, but human hope. The snow was still falling as they parted ways, Victoria to her downtown apartment to prepare for the morning, Daniel to the overnight shelter, but something fundamental had shifted between them. And in both their hearts, they carried the seed of possibility that sometimes the most important partnerships aren't forged in boardrooms, but in moments of unexpected connection between strangers who choose to see each other's humanity